The rain hammered the windshield like accusation from a forgotten God as I drove Grandpa Eli through the slick streets of rural Illinois. The nursing home's faded sign looming ahead like a gravestone. He'd clutched that old leather journal in his lap the whole way, knuckles white as bone. And when we pulled into the lot, he finally broke the silence with a voice cracked like autumn leaves. "Jack, boy, this is where the lies end. Read it. All of it. Before they will me inside." His eyes, those stormy blue pools I'd known since childhood, held mine with a desperation that chilled me deeper than the October wind, because in that moment, I saw not the stoic farmer who'd raised me on cornfields and hard truths, but a man unraveling, thread by fragile thread, before the secret he'd buried deeper than any root could reach. I took the journal, its cover warped from decades in a barn attic, and promised I'd honor it. He nodded, patted my hand with a tremor that belied his 87 years, and let the orderlies guide him away, his flannel shirt rumpled, jeans stiff with the scent of earth he could no longer till. That night, alone in his empty farmhouse with thunder rattling the windows, I cracked it open. The first page, in Grandpa's meticulous script, read, "For Samuel, who taught me love isn't a sin. It's the only salvation worth the hell." And just like that, the world I thought I knew splintered into shards of ink and memory, pulling me back to a summer in 1952 when two boys, not yet broken by the world, dared to dream under the same relentless sky. Eli Hawthorne was 22 that July, broad-shouldered and sun-baked from dawn to dusk battles with the stubborn soil of McHenry County. The Hawthorne farm had been his anchor since his pop dropped dead of a heart attack when Eli was 16, leaving him to shoulder the plow and the mortgage like a yoke too heavy for one soul. He woke before the roosters, his calloused palms gripping the tractor's wheel as it churned black earth into submission, dreaming only of yields that might keep the bank at bay. Sundays were for church, stiff collars and sermons on sin that made his skin crawl for reasons he couldn't name, and then back to the fields, where the isolation was a mercy. Eli wasn't like the other farmhands, with their crude jokes over whiskey and their easy conquests at county fairs. He kept to himself, sketching wildflowers in the margins of his ledger, wondering why the curve of a man's jaw in the Sears catalog stirred something fierce and unnamed in his chest. It was the new schoolteacher who shattered that quiet exile. Samuel Whitaker arrived in town like a rumor wrapped in tweed, fresh from some fancy teacher's college in Chicago, all sharp wit and softer edges that didn't belong in a place where men measured worth by bushels and bullhides. At 24, Samuel was the kind of handsome that snuck up on you, blonde hair swept back just so, green eyes that sparkled with mischief behind those wire glasses, and a laugh that carried over the schoolyard like wind chimes in a storm. He taught history and literature to the wide-eyed kids of farmers who could barely spell their own names, filling their heads with tales of revolutions and forbidden romances from dusty tomes. The town whispered about him, too city for corn country, too gentle for a world of rough hands. But Eli noticed him first at the general store, where Samuel was haggling over seed catalogs with old Mr. Hargrove, his voice animated, hands gesturing like he was conducting an orchestra of ideas. Their eyes met over a stack of burlap sacks, and Eli felt it like a lightning strike, that pull, magnetic and terrifying, rooting him to the spot. Samuel smiled, polite as pie, and asked about the best fertilizer for heirloom tomatoes, as if Eli were an encyclopedia rather than a stranger with dirt under his nails. They talked for an hour, the store emptying around them. Eli fumbling words he'd never used before, sonnets. Symbolism. The quiet rebellion in Thoreau's Walden. Samuel listened like Eli's voice was scripture, and when he left with a tip of his hat and a promise to borrow that book on wildflowers Eli mentioned, the air hummed with possibility. That night, Eli lay in his narrow bed, the farmhouse creaking like a confessional, and touched himself to the memory of those green eyes. Shame and ecstasy twisting like vines in his gut. He didn't know what it meant, this hunger, but he knew it was alive, and for the first time, so was he. By August, their paths crossed like fate scripted in the stars. Samuel boarded at Widow Jenkins' place on the edge of town, a sagging Victorian with ivy choking the porch, and he'd taken to walking the back roads to clear his head after lessons. One sweltering afternoon, Eli was mending fence wire along the creek when Samuel appeared. Shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, a book tucked under his arm. "Mr. Hawthorne," he called, voice light as creek water. "Fancy finding you here, wrestling barbed wire like it's Achilles' heel." Eli straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, his overalls clinging like a second skin, and managed a grin. "Just another day in paradise, Mr. Whitaker. What brings a scholar to these godforsaken banks?" They sat on a mossy bank then, skipping stones and trading stories. Eli of the farm's endless cycles. Samuel of dusty libraries and professors who railed against the unnatural vices of ancient Greeks. The sun dipped low, painting the water gold, and when their shoulders brushed, neither pulled away. Samuel's hand lingered on Eli's knee as he pointed out a heron in the reeds, and Eli's breath caught, the world narrowing to that point of contact. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Samuel murmured, his voice barely above the ripple. Eli swallowed hard, heart pounding like harvest thunder. "Every damn day. But today feels different." Their gazes locked, and in that suspended breath, Samuel leaned in, lips brushing Eli's in a kiss that tasted of salt and secrets. Soft as forgiveness, fierce as a vow. From there, it bloomed like the wild roses along the fence lines, stolen moments in haylofts and moonlit orchards, whispers in the dark where the world couldn't hear. Samuel would sneak out after curfew, his tweed jacket slung over his shoulder, and they'd meet at the old Whitaker barn on the outskirts, a relic from Samuel's family who'd fled the Dust Bowl years back. There, amid the scent of aged wood and forgotten hay, they'd lose themselves, Eli's rough hands tracing the fine lines of Samuel's collarbones, Samuel's fingers threading through Eli's hair as he recited poetry that made Eli feel seen, not sinful. "How do I love thee?" Samuel would murmur, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's words a shield against the shadows. Eli, who could barely read a map, learned to love with his body, his soul cracking open like sun-warmed earth. But paradise in 1952 Illinois was a fragile thing, hedged by hedges of hypocrisy. The town was a tinderbox of small-minded piety, Reverend Harlan thundering from the pulpit about Sodom's fall, farm wives clucking over that Whitaker boy who never courted a girl. Eli's sister, Ruth, married to a burly mechanic with fists like hams, warned him once after spotting Samuel at the diner, "Keep your distance, Eli." Folks talk, and talk turns to tar and feathers. Eli nodded, but his heart rebelled, pounding a defiant rhythm each time Samuel slipped him a note in a hollowed-out apple. Midnight. The mill. Bring your heart. One crisp September eve, as leaves turned traitor red, they pushed the boundaries too far. Samuel had planned a picnic by the quarry lake, a hidden jewel ring by birches, where the water mirrored stars like a lover's eyes. Eli arrived with a thermos of coffee and cornbread wrapped in check cloth, his best shirt ironed stiff. They ate cross-legged on a quilt stolen from Samuel's boarding house, laughing over dreams, Eli of buying out the mortgage, Samuel of teaching in a city where men like them could breathe free. As dusk bled into night, kisses deepened, hands wandering bolder, until Samuel pulled back, eyes shining with a mix of joy and fear. Eli, what if this is all we get? A lifetime of shadows. Eli cupped his face, thumbs stroking those high cheekbones. Then we'll make the shadows dance. He kissed him again, slow and searing, bodies pressing close on the quilt, the quarry's edge a silent witness. They made love there for the first time, tentative and reverent, the world reduced to gasps in the lap of water. It was ecstasy, pure and shattering, Eli discovering in Samuel's sighs the language of his own buried self. Samuel finding in Eli's strength the home he'd always sought. Afterward, tangled and spent, they lay watching fireflies wink like conspirators, promising forever in the spaces between breaths. Word got out, as it always does in towns where secrets are currency. It started with a whisper from a nosy kid who'd trailed Samuel on his walk, spotting the quilt by the lake. By the Sunday service, eyes bored into Eli's back like augers, Reverend Harlan's sermon twisting Leviticus into a noose. Abominations walk among us. Brothers, root them out, lest the Lord smite our fields barren. Eli felt Samuel's gaze from across the aisle, a lifeline in the storm. But when they met later at the creek, fear had etched new lines around Samuel's eyes. My landlady asked questions. Said she saw me leaving late. Eli, if they find out, they clung harder then, defiance fueling the fire. Samuel poured his soul into letters, hidden in the journal Eli kept under his mattress, pages of aching prose. Your touch is my compass in this fog of fear. My north where the world spins south. Eli responded in sketches. Wildflowers intertwined with the S of Samuel's name, tucked into Samuel's satchel at the schoolhouse door. They dreamed of escape, a freight train to San Francisco, where whispers said men loved openly in hidden bars. But autumn deepened, and so did the threats, tires slashed on Samuel's borrowed Ford. Anonymous notes nailed to the farmhouse door, Sodom's spawn. Repent or burn. The breaking came swift as a scythe. In late October, a posse of drunk farmhands cornered Samuel after a PDA meeting, their breath sour with moonshine and malice. Teacher's pet for the devil. Ain't ya? One snarled, fists flying before Samuel could bolt. Eli heard the commotion from the road, sprinting through the dark with a pitchfork in hand, roaring like a wounded bear. He fought them off, 3 against 1, blood slicking his knuckles, but not before a boot cracked Samuel's ribs, and a ringed fist split his lip. They dragged Eli home at dawn, bruised and bellowing apologies to a silent farmhouse, while Samuel vanished into the clinic, swearing Eli to silence. That was the end, or so it seemed. Samuel's resignation letter hit the school board Monday, postmarked for Chicago. He left without goodbye. A note slipped under Eli's door. My love, the world is crueler than we knew. Live for us both. Forgive me. S. Eli burned it in the stove, ashes scattering like his resolve, and threw himself into the winter's work, plowing snowdrifts, mending what broke. He dated Ruth's friend Mary for appearances, a chaste courtship ending in a ring he never deserved, a marriage that birthed my father and a lifetime of hollow routines. Samuel became a ghost in the journal, pages filling with unsent pleas, until Eli sealed it away, burying the boy he'd been under layers of regret and routine. Decades blurred. The farm prospered, then faltered. Dad took over till cancer claimed him young, leaving me, Jack, to inherit the ache without the words. Grandpa Eli raised me after Mom remarried. His stories all soil and sweat, never shadows. He watched me grow, marry Lisa, father 2 girls, and never once hinted at the hollow in his chest. Until that rainy drive, when a nursing home's sterile lights beckoned like Judgment Day. Back in the farmhouse, journal open on the kitchen table scarred by generations. I read through the night. Eli's words painted Samuel alive again, his laugh like summer rain, his touch a balm against the world's thorns. But the later entries twisted the knife, Eli's futile searches in Chicago's crowds. A glimpse of blonde hair in a diner that wasn't him, letters returned unopened, the war in Vietnam that stole friends but not the war in his heart. I planted our roses by the creek, one red, and they bloomed blood red, accusing me of survival. Tears blurred the ink as dawn crept in. And I understood, Grandpa hadn't just hidden a love, he'd hidden himself, piece by fractured piece, to shield us from shards. I drove to the nursing home that morning, journal clutched like a talisman, the Midwest flatlands stretching endless under a sky scrubbed clean by storm. Eli was in a room smelling of bleach and boiled cabbage, propped in bed within 4 dripping slow as regret. His eyes lit when I entered, but shadowed with the weight. "Did you read it, Jack?" he rasped, voice thin as the blanket over his knees. I sat beside him, taking his hand, frail now, but I remembered it threshing wheat. Every word. Grandpa. Samuel. He was your world. The name hung between us, sacred and sharp. Eli's face crumpled, then steadied, a lifetime's dam breaking in a single sob. He was. And I let the world take him from me. Coward that I was. No, I said fiercely, gripping tighter. You survived. For Dad. For me. That's not cowardice. That's love. The kind that endures. We talked then, hours bleeding into afternoon. Eli filling gaps with stories I'd craved. Samuel's favorite Keats poem. The way he'd hum folk tunes while grading papers. The scar on his knuckle from a childhood fall. Laughter mingled with tears. The room warming as sunlight slanted through blinds. I told him about my own hidden doubts. The nights I'd lain awake questioning why Lisa's touch never sparked like the men in my dreams. But that's another unraveling. For now, it was enough to witness his. Word spread, as it does in families wired by blood and silence. I called Aunt Ruth, her voice cracking over the line from Florida. Eli, that Whitaker boy, Lord. I knew something simmered, but she came the next week, bearing pecan pie and apologies wrapped in Kleenex. Uncle Tom, the mechanic's son, grumbled at first. Times were different. Pa, but sat through the journal's readings, his bulldog face softening to something human. The girls, my daughters Mia and Sophie, 12 and 10, listened wide-eyed, sketching Samuel from Grandpa's descriptions, their crayons birthing a man from legend. But the true storm brewed when I tracked Samuel down, or what was left of him. The journal's final pages held a faded address in Evanston, a retirement community by Lake Michigan, and a plea, if fate is kind, find him. Tell him I never stopped. My hand shook as I dialed. A nurse answering. Mr. Whitaker? He's frail, but lucid. Struggling with dementia, but names still stick. I drove north the next day, Lake Michigan's gray waves mirroring my turmoil, arriving at a brick building that smelled of institutional soup and second chances. Samuel Whitaker was 89, a shadow of the firebrand in Eli's sketches, hair snow white and thinning, green eyes clouded but kind, parked in a wheelchair by a window overlooking the water. He wore a cardigan over polo, slacks pressed neat as his old teaching days, a blanket draped like a truce flag. "Oh," he murmured when I introduced myself, confusion flickering like faulty bulbs. "Jack Hawthorne," I said, kneeling to his level, journal open to a pressed rose petal. "Eli's grandson." He asked me to come. The name landed like a stone in still water. Samuel's breath hitched, eyes sharpening as if memory were a lens focusing. "Eli? My Eli." His hand trembled toward the page, fingers tracing the faded ink. The farm boy with a wild heart. God. The creek. The stars. Tears carved paths down weathered cheeks. And he clutched the journal like a prodigal son. I read to him then aloud, voice steady through the quake, Eli's words pouring out like balm on old wounds. Samuel nodded, fragments surfacing, the quarry kiss, the letters. The night he fled Chicago fearing for Eli's life more than his own. I thought distance would save him, he whispered. Foolish. Love doesn't fade with miles, it festers. By evening, we'd pieced a plan. I'd bring Eli here. Or Samuel north. No more hiding. The nurses smiled indulgently, but I saw the spark reignite in Samuel's gaze. A bonfire banked, but not dead. Getting Eli cleared for the trip was a battle. Doctors citing frailty. Family citing logistics, but love, it turns out, trumps clipboards. 2 weeks later, under a December sky heavy with promise, I wheeled Eli into that Evanston sunroom, Samuel waiting like a sentinel by the window. The air thickened, time folding in on itself as their eyes met across the room. Eli's gasp was a prayer answered. Sam, after all this. Samuel rose on unsteady legs, arms opening like forgotten harbors. Eli Hawthorne, you stubborn field hand. Took you long enough. They collided in a hug that defied age and ache. Frail frames melding as if no years had passed. Sobs mingling with laughter that echoed off the walls. I backed away, tears blurring the sight, giving them the space denied for decades. Through the glass, Lake Michigan churned restless, but inside, peace settled like first snow. 2 men, weathered but whole, reclaiming what the world had stolen. In the days that followed, they shared a room, anecdotes flowing freer than 4 drips. Eli sketched again, Samuel reciting poetry from memory, their hands intertwined even in sleep. The family visited in waves, Ruth baking pies, the girls drawing portraits, Uncle Tom admitting over coffee. Pa, you taught me more with this than any sermon. I watched Grandpa's face bloom, lines softening as if the journal's weight had lifted, and understood the humanistic core. Love isn't defined by labels or eras. It's the quiet revolution of choosing vulnerability over vaults. As spring thawed the Midwest, Eli and Samuel planned a simple ceremony, not legal, not church-bound, but there's vows by the creek where it began, wild roses witnesses. But fate, that capricious scribe, had other ink. In April, Eli's heart faltered, the same thief that took his pa, and he slipped away one dawn. Samuel at his side, whispering sonnets to the end. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways," Samuel murmured, holding the hand that had once held his so fiercely. Samuel followed 3 months later, pneumonia claiming what time couldn't, the journal on his chest like a shield. Their funerals merged by family decree, one service in Illinois soil. Ashes mingled under the oak by the farmhouse. Roses planted anew. I scattered the petals myself. Mia and Sophie Channing made up poems, the wind carrying whispers of forgiveness. Now, the journal sits on my shelf. Open to the last page Eli added after Evanston. Love hidden isn't lost. It's the seed that outlives the storm. I read it to my girls at bedtime, teaching them that humanity's worth lies in the truths we dare unearth, the loves we dare claim, in a world still shadowed by silence. Grandpa's story isn't tragedy, it's testament. A reminder that even in the nursing home's reluctant embrace, hearts can finally beat free.